Hello and welcome viewers and subscribers of AVG News. Olisi, the son of Nobe, is my name. And welcome to our first live broadcast of 2024. Yeah, I believe this is the first. And we have a number of topics that we need to discuss. But today I decided that we have to start with news doing the rounds, or the campaigns that are doing the round, especially from our beloved Zimbabwe, which is where I come from. And this particular item is about a petition that many of you have already seen, which is circulating, where the petition seeks people to sign, and they want to gather as many numbers as possible of signatures. And this is about fresh elections that these guys are seeking. I saw also Promise Mkwanazi, who is the spokesperson of Triple C, is the spokesperson, of course, of one faction of Triple C. You would remember that. There's another whose spokesperson is Jacob Mafume. So Promise Mkwanazi is I saw him circulating this petition. There are a number of people who have been asking again if the fresh elections are going to happen. They want to know what is going to happen. Is Zimbabwe still in the agenda of the SADC and the African Union? So this is what I want to talk about for the next few minutes, maybe in the next 5 minutes. This is what I want to talk about. Yes, the petition is there, and let me read it out to you. It says, for those that are already on X, you might have seen it because Promise Mkwanazi shared it. He's not the only one. There are a number of people who have shared it. It says, demand for fresh elections in Zimbabwe by June 2024, supervised and monitored by the United Nations. Sign the petition. Then it's written, fresh elections, June 2024. So this is what I want us to talk about. Is it possible that Zimbabwe can be forced into fresh elections by June 2024? I think there is a number of considerations to make. First and foremost, as I said in my previous broadcast, is it possible that Zimbabwe can be forced into fresh elections? If so, who can force Zimbabwe into fresh elections? And is there a timeline for Zimbabwe to be forced into fresh elections? I've tackled that before. Many of you thought that maybe I was just trying to pour cold water on a hot plate of emotion. But what I wanted us to do is to continue telling each other the truth, because at the end of the day, it's of no use for us to lie to each other. So, was there a chance that Zimbabwe could be forced into fresh elections after the announcement of the results from the August 23 and 24 elections, 2023, that is? Yes, there was. When and how was this supposed to be reached out? The first and foremost step that was supposed to be taken was that it didn't have to be Triple C. Let me state this. It had to be any political party that contested. It had to be anybody who had evidence that the elections had gross irregularities, and that those gross irregularities had therefore affected the outcome of the June 23-24, or I mean the August 23-24, 2023 elections. There had to be empirical evidence, unquestionable evidence, admissible evidence that the elections were marked by gross irregularities, and that therefore, because of these gross irregularities, the outcome of the election was not a true and proper reflection of the will of the people. It was not a proper and true reflection of the votes cast during the election on the 23rd and 24th of August, or that people who were supposed to vote, who queued to try and vote, didn't manage to vote because of these gross irregularities, and that the number of people that were prevented from voting was enough to alter the result as we ended up getting. Now, when was this supposed to be done? There is a timeline within, I think it's a week after the election or the announcement of the results. You need to make this court appearance or a court application to have the elections nullified. So the parties or Zimbabweans had a chance to go to court with empirical evidence, with admissible evidence to prove that the elections were not held or were marked by gross irregularities, which gross irregularities therefore affected the outcome of the elections. Yes, we saw the irregularities. There were plenty of them, several of them, but for as long as we didn't take them to a court of law in Zimbabwe and prove beyond doubt that these irregularities were there, number one, that number two, these irregularities affected the outcome of first the voting process and then the outcome of the elections as we got it. Unless and until, or because we did not do that, we therefore were left with no ground to force a fresh election. The court in Zimbabwe, given this kind of a petition, was supposed to make a ruling that, yes, indeed, there were gross irregularities which marred this election, and therefore, because of these gross irregularities, the outcome of this election cannot be entertained, cannot be seen or declared a true reflection of the will of the people because of A, B, C, D, which becomes a gross irregularity. So the court, if the court had made such a ruling, it had the right, it had the power, the most powerful body to nullify the Zimbabwean election was the Zimbabwean courts. So this didn't happen because the mainstream opposition at that particular time, which was the one that claimed that it had won the election, which was the one that claimed that it had been robbed of the election result, or that the elections had been rigged in favor of President Emmerson Mnangagwa, did not go to court. You remember that there are still videos where during that particular time, during that time frame of going to court, I stated here that unless and until CCC goes to court to prove that there were gross irregularities, that the gross irregularities affected the outcome of the election, that the gross irregularities disadvantaged the mainstream opposition and the mainstream opposition leader, who in this particular instance were CCC and Advocate Nelson Chamisa respectively. Because they didn't do that, there was no other ground. I stated that they should go to court. They said they're not going to court because the courts are captured. Some of you supported them and said this cannot happen because the courts are captured. I even told you that for as long as it doesn't happen, there will be no fresh elections because we would have no leg to stand on. So the SADC election reporter, the SADC election observation mission report alone is not enough. The other observer missions reports are also not enough. And for that matter, even the SADC election observer mission, which was led by Dr. Nevas Mumba, didn't say or suggest that the elections of Zimbabwe or the outcome must be nullified. They didn't have that kind of power. They don't have that kind of power. But even though what they said is some aspects of the elections did not meet the standards of conducting democratic elections, some aspects. So when they say some aspects, they are saying that there are aspects which did meet. They highlighted those aspects which did not meet the required standards of holding a free and democratic election. Then also, I remember reading the recommendation from the SADC election observation mission as presented by Dr. Nevas Mumba after the elections in Zimbabwe. It said, those who are aggrieved should exhaust all legal processes. I read that out, but still, because people believed in the lie that there would be fresh elections, that the SADC election observation mission would make a presentation to the SADC that elections in Zimbabwe must be administered or must be held again, they insulted me. But I knew this was not going to happen because, number two, the SADC doesn't have any power. They have the mandate to force a member state to hold an election or a fresh election. They don't have that power. They don't have that mandate. All they can do is that they would read the SEOM report, present it at a SADC summit, deliberate on it, rebuke whoever is found guilty or offside. After that, they can make recommendations for the next election. They cannot force anyone to hold fresh election. It's unprecedented. It wasn't going to happen in Zimbabwe. I stated it here. Listen, you guys listened to some journalists that are paid to divert your attention from the real issues, to divert your attention from the truth. They told you that Zimbabwe was on the SADC election, on the SADC agenda, that Zimbabwe was the main reason why SADC was holding extraordinary summits. I told you that that was because these summits were called to discuss the critical situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there is a civil war, where there is insurgency, and where the regional body wanted to send send an army, and this has happened. Nothing about Zimbabwe except that they noted the report from the SADC election observation mission, and that was all. We came here a number of times. We told you that, guys, this is the situation on the ground, but because people have chosen to be lied to, they have chosen lies over the truth, you continue to insult me, you continue to disbelieve me, you continue, even now, you are believing that there will be fresh elections in Zimbabwe. Let me tell you, other than by-elections, as I have told you before, there will be no fresh election in Zimbabwe until 2028. There won't be. Believe you me, there won't be. So this petition, you can sign it, but at the end of the day, there is no way in the Zimbabwean laws where people can sit, write a petition, and fresh elections, and then have them held. Number two, there is no way that the SADC can administer elections in Zimbabwe. There is no way that the African Union can administer elections in Zimbabwe. There's absolutely no way that the UN can administer elections in Zimbabwe. That is an absolute rubbish statement. It can never happen. Don't believe these things. These are diversionary tactics. These are things that are meant to keep you believing that this so-called opposition is doing something. They're not doing anything. These guys have just forgotten everything. What they are doing now is to play around with your emotions, is for you to keep believing in them because they failed. They failed you, and the next election will be 2028. So they want to remain relevant so that come 2028, you would say they did something. And then, even if there were to be elections in Zimbabwe in June 2024, do we have enough time to usher in electoral reforms? Because for as long as we go to the next election without electoral reforms, we are not doing anything, because the same result, the same atmosphere, the same environment are going to befall us. What makes you think that if we hold elections in June, ZANU-PF will allow the opposition to campaign as freely as they want, that ZANU-PF will allow the ZEC to be as independent as it is supposed to be, that fuss will be dismantled? It's disingenuous. So, ladies and gentlemen, forget about fresh elections in Zimbabwe. That will never happen, except maybe if during parliament in session, the building collapses and all lawmakers get killed in that disaster. That's when fresh elections can be held before 2028. Or if government sits and says, because of ABC, like what they did in 2008, let's hold elections a bit before the time that they are supposed to be held in 2028. And that is up to ZANU-PF. But there is no way that they can be forced into doing that. There's no way that they can be forced by a petition to do that, or by the SADC or the African Union or the United Nations for that matter. The United Nations is busy. There is a genocide taking place in Gaza. There are wars everywhere. There is hunger, there is famine. People are busy out there. They've got nothing anymore to do with Zimbabwean elections. They know that Zimbabwean elections are going to come in 2028. Zimbabwe is not top of the agenda right now. The only thing in the SADC that's top of the agenda is that Emmerson Mnangagwa is the next SADC chairperson. That's the only thing that Zimbabwe as a reference is mentioned in the SADC. The rest, there's absolutely nothing like that. Somebody is saying, I'm a ZANU-PF project. If I'm a ZANU-PF project, which tells you the truth, then ZANU-PF is the truth. Because at the end of the day, we cannot come here and lie to each other just to please each other with lies. Believe what you want to believe, but the lie is going to, at the end of the day, hit you on the face, and you then realize that this was a lie. So guys, forget about fresh elections. There will be no fresh elections. Whatever you call me whatever you want, but at the end of the day, there will be no fresh elections in Zimbabwe. There is no basis for those fresh elections. We are stuck with the failing ZANU-PF up to 2028. And unfortunately, so far, there's no opposition to even challenge ZANU-PF in parliament. Lucky enough, they haven't obtained the two-thirds majority that they want. Otherwise, they would be changing the constitution. You heard the calls that Mnangagwa 2030, it's because these guys want to change the constitution to allow their president to sit in for a third term, to run for the third term. So that is the actuality on the ground. There will be no fresh elections in Zimbabwe. Whoever tells you that there will be fresh elections, or who wants you to continue fighting for fresh elections, is themselves a ZANU-PF project. They would want to divert your attention from real issues on the ground. There are critical issues of a liquidity crunch in Zimbabwe. There are critical issues of a cholera outbreak killing people. There are critical issues of hunger and famine. There is drought in Zimbabwe. There is looting in Zimbabwe. There is kleptocracy in Zimbabwe. There is political violence in Zimbabwe. There is a judicial capture in Zimbabwe. And these people want to divert your attention so that you concentrate on things that do not exist, because those particular people are part of the ZANU-PF project that someone here who is themselves maybe a ZANU-PF project or a ZANU-PF member trying to enforce on us, to accuse us of being. Judge journalists by their works. Judge them by the outcome of the predictions that they make. We have always been consistent in this, that there will be no fresh elections in Zimbabwe. And we have given you the reasons why there will be no fresh elections in Zimbabwe. Some of you ran with the propaganda that there were going to be fresh elections in Zimbabwe. You ran with the propaganda that there were going to be Zimbabwe on the agenda of the SADC Extraordinary Summit or Special Summit. We told you that Zimbabwe was not on the agenda. You said that our sources were fake. At the end of the day, what we gave you checked out. Continue to second guess us, but at the end of the day, we will not tell you stuff that we don't know, stuff that we're not sure of. So thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it. But also, give us your ideas, give us your suggestions as to how to widen our coverage, what other topics to discuss, but also share with us your views. Thank you very much.